They said the dog could sense things no human ever could, but no one ever asked what it was trying to warn them about. The wind moved low across the training yard, carrying the faint scent of rust and rain as Ethan Cole stepped forward, his boots scraping softly against the gravel, guided only by the distant echo of voices and the rhythm of his own breath. 40 years old, and already carrying a silence heavier than most men twice his age, his world had gone dark 3 winters ago after a roadside blast overseas, leaving him with nothing but memory, instinct, and a stubborn refusal to be pitted somewhere to his left. A chain rattled once, sharp and metallic, followed by the low murmur of a handler's voice, tense, careful, as if speaking near something unpredictable. "That's Rex," the man said, though Ethan didn't need the name to feel it. The air itself seemed to tighten, like a held breath waiting to be released. "Retired K9. Highly trained, but we don't recommend." The sentence never finished because Rex had already moved. There was no bark, no sudden aggression, only the quiet, deliberate sound of paws crossing concrete, slow, measured, controlled. Ethan didn't flinch, didn't step back. He simply stood there, hands slightly extended, not searching, not demanding, just offering, and then he felt it, a warm breath against his fingers, followed by the soft, unmistakable touch of a nose pressing gently into his palm, the kind of contact that carried intention, not instinct, around them. The yard fell still. Even the wind seemed to pause. The handler exhaled under his breath, almost disbelieving. He's never done that before. But Ethan only nodded faintly, as if some part of him had expected this all along, because in that brief moment, something passed between them, something quieter than sight, deeper than sound, a recognition that didn't need explanation. Rex didn't pull away, didn't retreat. He stayed there, steady, present, like a shadow that had finally found its place. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt something shift inside the darkness he carried. Not light, not yet, but something close, something waiting, because sometimes the ones the world fears the most are the only ones still listening to what truly matters. The ride back was quiet, the kind of quiet that settled deep into the bones, broken only by the steady hum of the truck engine and the soft shift of Rex's weight in the passenger seat. Ethan kept one hand resting lightly against the dog's shoulder, not guiding, not holding, just there, feeling the slow rise and fall of breath that seemed calmer than anything he had known in years outside. The late afternoon air carried the scent of dry leaves and distant rain, the kind that never quite reached the ground. When they reached the small rental house at the edge of town, Ethan stepped out slowly, counting the steps from memory, 4 to the porch, 2 to the door. The wood creaked under his boots as he unlocked it. Inside, the space felt still, empty in a way that echoed. Rex entered first, his paws silent against the floor, moving room to room with a purpose that did not feel like curiosity, but something closer to inspection. Ethan set his bag down near the wall and listened. The house had its own rhythm, the faint tick of cooling pipes, the whisper of air through the vents, but beneath it, something else, something Rex had already noticed. The dog stopped near the far corner of the living room, body stiff, ears forward, a low sound building in his chest, not a growl of threat, but a focus, of attention. Ethan tilted his head slightly, sensing the shift. "What is it, boy?" he asked quietly. Rex did not respond with movement, only with stillness, as if waiting for something unseen to reveal itself. Minutes passed, slow and stretched. Then Rex stepped closer to Ethan and nudged his hand, firm this time, insistent, guiding him back toward the door. Ethan hesitated, confusion brushing against instinct, but something in the dog's urgency felt different, sharper. He followed, counting steps backward now. The air near the hallway felt warmer, faint, almost unnoticeable, but there a subtle change. Like the breath of the house had shifted. Outside, the evening light was fading, cool air brushing against his face as he stepped onto the porch. Rex remained pressed close to his side, unmoving. Watching the door, Ethan stood there, unsure, until it came, a soft pop from inside, followed by the faint hiss of something releasing. Then silence again, deeper this time, heavier. Ethan exhaled slowly, the realization settling in without panic. Only clarity. Rex had not reacted to danger. He had responded to something before it became one. The handler's words returned to him. Misunderstood. Too dangerous. Ethan shook his head slightly, his hand resting on Rex's neck, the dog's fur warm. Beneath his fingers, "You are not the problem," he murmured under his breath. Rex shifted just enough to press closer, as if acknowledging something unspoken. The night settled around them, quiet and wide, and for the first time since stepping into that house, Ethan did not feel alone in the dark, because sometimes the things we cannot see are already being watched over by something that never stopped paying attention. Morning came slowly, carried in on a thin line of cool air that slipped through the edges of the porch as Ethan sat on the wooden step with a cup of coffee cooling untouched in his hand. Rex lay beside him, alert but still, his ears shifting at sounds too distant for Ethan to place. Somewhere down the road a car passed, tires whispering over asphalt, then fading into silence. It had been less than 12 hours since the house had breathed wrong, since the air had changed in a way only Rex had noticed before it mattered. Ethan turned his head slightly toward the street, listening, feeling the weight of something he could not yet name. Rex rose without warning, his body tightening in a way that felt deliberate, controlled, not panic but decision. His gaze fixed on a direction Ethan could not see. Footsteps approached, steady and unhurried. A man's voice followed, low, casual. "Morning," the stranger said, stopping just short of the fence line. Ethan nodded politely. "Morning," he replied. The exchange simple, ordinary, but Rex did not relax. A low vibration moved through his chest, barely audible but unmistakable. Ethan's hand found the dog's neck, feeling the tension beneath the fur. "Easy," he murmured, but Rex did not step back. The stranger lingered a moment. Too long, as if studying something. Then continued walking, his footsteps fading. The air settled again, but not completely. Not the way it had before. Ethan remained still, processing. The handler's warning echoed again in his memory. Too dangerous. Unpredictable. Yet nothing about Rex felt uncontrolled. Every movement had purpose. Every reaction came before explanation. Later that afternoon, Ethan found himself standing inside the small local records office, the scent of old paper and dust filling the room. A clerk guided him through a series of files with quiet patience. Ethan asked about the dog, about Rex, about the incident that had marked him as unfit. The pages turned slowly, each one carrying fragments of a story that had never been fully told. A retired officer, a routine check, an unexpected reaction, labeled as aggression, filed away, closed without question. But something did not sit right. Not after what Ethan had already witnessed. Not after the way Rex had reacted. To the stranger that morning, patterns began to form, small, incomplete, but enough to create doubt, enough to suggest that what had been written might not be the whole truth. When they returned home that evening, the sky carried the low hum of an approaching storm, distant thunder rolling like a memory across the horizon. Rex paused at the doorway again, ears forward, listening to something deeper than weather. Ethan stood behind him, waiting, trusting, because sometimes the clearest signals do not come from what is seen, but from what refuses to be ignored. And somewhere between silence and instinct, a truth was beginning to surface, one that had been there all along, waiting for someone willing to listen. The storm did not arrive all at once. It built slowly, like a thought forming in the back of the mind. The air thickened, the wind shifted direction, and the house settled with a low creak that seemed deeper than wood and nails. Ethan stood just inside the doorway, one hand resting lightly against the frame while Rex moved ahead of him. Each step measured, each pause deliberate. The dog stopped near the same corner as the night before. Ears angled forward, body still, but this time there was no warmth in the air, no sign of gas or change, only silence, the kind that carried weight. Ethan listened, not with his ears alone, but with the quiet awareness he had learned to trust since losing his sight. Outside, a car engine idled briefly before cutting off, too close to be passing through. Rex's posture tightened, a low sound forming in his chest again, controlled, restrained, not fear, not aggression, recognition. Ethan turned his head slightly toward the front of the house, counting distance, Mapping space in his mind, the gravel outside shifted under a slow step. Then another, someone approaching but not announcing themselves, not knocking, just lingering. The same presence from the morning, something about it unfinished. Rex moved closer to Ethan, pressing against his leg. Not to hide, but to anchor, to signal. The dog's breathing slowed, steady and focused. Then he turned his head sharply toward the side of the house, where the wall met the narrow strip of yard. Ethan followed the movement instinctively, stepping carefully across the floor, his hand brushing the edge of the table. Then the wall, grounding himself in the familiar layout. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic, distant but real. The footsteps shifted again, this time retreating, slow, deliberate, as if whoever had been there had decided to leave without being seen. The engine started once more, fading into the distance. And only then did Rex relax, just slightly. The tension easing from his frame like a held breath finally released. Ethan exhaled, long and quiet, his hand resting on the dog's back. "You knew," he said softly, not as a question, but as an understanding, because whatever Rex was sensing, it was not random. It followed patterns, moments, people, and those patterns were beginning to align with something larger than coincidence. Later that night, as the storm finally broke and rain tapped steadily against the roof, Ethan sat at the small kitchen table, a folder of copied records spread out in front of him. The edges of the paper rough beneath his fingers, he traced the names again, the retired officer, the location, the date, and then another name, one that had not meant anything before but now carried weight, the same name that matched the address next door, the neighbor who had passed by that morning, the one Rex had reacted to without hesitation. Ethan leaned back slowly, the pieces shifting into place, not fully formed, but enough to feel the shape of something hidden, something overlooked. Rex lifted his head from the floor, ears tilting toward Ethan as if sensing the change in his thoughts. And in the quiet space between thunder and rain, a truth began to emerge, not loud, not obvious, but steady, like a signal waiting for the right moment to be heard. Because sometimes the past does not stay buried. It simply waits for someone who cannot be distracted by what is seen, someone willing to trust what is felt instead. The rain carried through the night and into the early morning, a steady rhythm against the roof that blurred the line between hours. Ethan had not slept much, not because of fear, but because something in his mind refused to settle. The pattern was there now, not complete, but real, and Rex felt it too. The dog had barely moved from his place near the door, alert even in stillness, as if guarding something unseen. When the first light of morning filtered through the clouds, pale and quiet, Ethan rose from the chair and moved carefully across the room, the floor familiar beneath his steps. Rex followed instantly, close, precise, matching his pace without needing command. Outside, the air smelled clean after the storm, but underneath it lingered something else, faint, almost metallic again, like a trace that had not fully washed away. Ethan paused at the edge of the porch, listening. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet for that hour. No distant engines, no footsteps, just the soft drip of water from the roof. Then Rex shifted, his body tightening in that same controlled way. Not panic, not confusion, but certainty. His head turned slowly toward the neighboring house, the one tied to the name Ethan had traced the night before. The connection sat heavy now, no longer coincidence. Ethan lowered himself down the steps, counting carefully, one hand brushing the railing. Rex stayed just ahead, guiding but also watching, always watching. They move along the narrow strip of grass that separated the properties, the ground still damp beneath Ethan's boots, each step deliberate, measured. The closer they got, the more Rex's breathing changed, not faster, but deeper, focused, like a signal locking onto something. Ethan could feel it through the air, shift, subtle but undeniable, the kind of change most people would miss. Entirely, they stopped near the side of the neighboring house, where the wall met a small shed partially hidden by overgrown branches. Rex stepped forward, nose low, then paused, his paw lifting slightly before resting against the wooden panel, not scratching, not forcing, just marking the place. Ethan reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the surface, The wood felt different there, cooler, uneven, as if something beneath it did not belong. He pressed lightly, and there it was, a faint, hollow sound, almost lost beneath the distant drip of water. Rex let out a quiet breath. Not a warning this time, but something closer to confirmation. Ethan remained still for a long moment, his hand resting against the panel, the realization forming without urgency. Only clarity. Whatever Rex had been trying to show him, whatever truth had been buried beneath assumptions and reports and quick judgments. It was here, not in words, not in records, but in something real, something physical, something that had waited quietly until someone came who could not rely on sight alone. Ethan exhaled slowly, his voice low, steady. "You are not wrong," he said, more to himself and to the dog. Rex stayed close, unmoving, as if he had been waiting for that understanding all along. And in that quiet space between the storm and the morning, the line between instinct and truth finally began to disappear, leaving only one thing behind, something undeniable, something that could no longer be ignored. The wood did not give way easily, not because it was strong, but because it had been left untouched for too long. Holding on to silence like it had been asked to forget, Ethan kept one hand against the panel, while the other moved slowly along its edge, mapping its shape, its seams, the slight gap where the grain shifted unnaturally. Rex stayed close, his body angled toward the shed, not tense now, but focused in a quieter way, as if the urgency had passed and what remained was patience, the kind that waits for truth to surface on its own. Ethan pressed again, firmer this time, and the panel shifted just enough to confirm what he already knew. It was not part of the original structure. It had been placed there deliberately to cover something. The air around them felt different, not heavier, but charged with the kind of stillness that comes before understanding. Ethan stepped back slightly, his mind moving through the pieces, the reports, the neighbor, the reaction, the way Rex had never once hesitated, never once acted without reason. A memory surfaced, the handler's voice, uncertain, incomplete. He reacted without warning. But that was not true. Ethan realized there had always been a warning. It just had not been seen. Rex shifted again, his nose brushing lightly against Ethan's hand, grounding him, bringing him back to the present moment. The damp earth beneath their feet, the faint scent of metal still lingering in the air. Ethan turned his head slightly, listening. The neighborhood remained quiet, but the quiet now felt watched, not empty. He could feel it in the way Rex's ears adjusted, tracking something distant, something moving slowly, not approaching yet, but not gone either. Ethan exhaled, steady, controlled, the same way he had learned to breathe through uncertainty long before the darkness. "We do this carefully," he murmured, more to himself and to the dog, because whatever lay behind that panel was not just an answer, it was part of a story that had been interrupted, misread, and buried. He reached down, fingers searching along the base of the shed until they found a loose piece of metal, cold and thin, likely part of an old tool left behind. He used it gently, working it into the narrow seam, applying just enough pressure to widen the gap without forcing it. The wood creaked softly, resisting at first, then giving a fraction of an inch, enough to let a breath of air escape from behind it. The scent was faint but distinct, not decay, not danger, but something preserved, something sealed away intentionally. Rex lowered his head slightly, ears forward, listening deeper now, not to the outside world, but to whatever rested behind that barrier. Ethan paused, feeling the shift, the moment stretching. This was not about rushing forward, not about breaking through. It was about understanding why it had been hidden in the first place. Footsteps sounded faintly in the distance again, slow, deliberate, the same pattern as before. Returning, Ethan straightened slightly, his hand still resting on the panel, and for the first time since stepping into this unfolding truth, he realized they were not the only ones aware of it. Rex moved closer, pressing firmly against his side, a silent signal, not of fear, but of readiness. Because sometimes the truth does not stay hidden because it is forgotten. Sometimes it is hidden because someone is still trying to keep it that way. The footsteps did not rush. They never had. They came with the same slow certainty as before, gravel shifting under measured weight. each step placed with intention, not hesitation. Ethan remained still beside the loosened panel, one hand resting lightly against the wood, the other close to Rex's shoulder, feeling the subtle tension building again beneath the dog's fur. Not panic, not fear, but awareness sharpening into focus. The air itself seemed to narrow, pulling everything into a single moment that refused to pass unnoticed. The presence stopped just beyond the edge of the shed, close enough now that Ethan could hear the faint sound of breath, steady, controlled, a man used to patience. Rex did not growl this time. He stood firm, body aligned between Ethan and the direction of the sound, his silence louder than any warning. Ethan tilted his head slightly, listening, not searching for danger but for truth. "You have been here before," he said quietly, his voice calm, not accusing, just certain. The man did not answer immediately. The pause stretched long enough to confirm everything Ethan needed to know. Then a voice came, low, measured. "You should not be digging into things that were already settled." The words carried no anger, only a quiet insistence, like someone repeating a decision they had already made long ago. Ethan nodded faintly, his hand still resting against the panel. "Settled does not always mean finished," he replied, the rainwater still dripping from the roof behind them, marking time in soft, uneven taps. Rex shifted slightly, his ears flicking toward the man's voice, tracking every nuance, every breath. The silence returned again, heavier now, layered with something unspoken. Then the man stepped closer, just enough for the gravel to shift again beneath his weight. "That dog," he said, a slight edge entering his tone for the first time. "It caused problems before. You do not understand what it is capable of." Ethan's expression did not change, though he could not see. His understanding had never depended on sight. "I understand exactly what he is capable of," he said softly, his fingers brushing against Rex's neck in a quiet reassurance. "He notices what others ignore." Another pause followed, shorter this time, less controlled. The man's breath shifted, a subtle break in the rhythm. Rex responded instantly, not with movement, but with a deeper stillness, locking onto that change as if it confirmed something long suspected. Ethan turned his head slightly toward the panel again, the unfinished edge beneath his fingers now feeling heavier with meaning. "Whatever is behind this," he continued, "it is the reason he reacted before, not without cause, not without warning." The wind moved through the narrow space between the houses, carrying the faint metallic scent again, stronger now, undeniable. The man exhaled slowly, and in that single breath, something shifted, not fully revealed, but no longer hidden as completely as before. "Some things are better left alone," he said quietly, but the certainty had faded, replaced by something closer to doubt. Ethan shook his head once, slow and steady, not when they were never understood to begin with. Rex stepped forward half a pace, not aggressive, not advancing, just present, a silent line drawn between truth and whatever had tried to bury it. The man did not move closer again. Instead, his footsteps retreated, slower this time, less certain than before, until the sound faded completely, leaving only the soft drip of water and the steady rhythm of Rex's breathing. Ethan remained there for a long moment, the world around him quiet but no longer empty, his hand still resting against the panel that held more than wood and nails behind it. Because sometimes the moment truth is questioned is the same moment it begins to surface, whether anyone is ready for it or not. The quiet that followed did not feel empty anymore. It felt full, as if something long hidden had finally taken breath. Ethan remained by the shed for a moment longer, his hand still resting against the loosened panel, feeling the faint coolness beneath the wood. Rex stood beside him, steady now, the tension from before easing into something calmer, more certain, the kind of stillness that comes after a decision has already been made. Ethan exhaled slowly and adjusted his stance, the gravel beneath his boots shifting slightly as he repositioned himself, his fingers tracing the edge of the panel again, finding the gap he had widened earlier. This time he did not hesitate. He slid the thin metal piece back into place and applied steady pressure, careful, controlled. The wood resisted for a second, then gave with a soft, hollow sound, just enough to create an opening. A narrow space where air could move freely between what had been hidden and what was now exposed. A faint scent. Drifted out, not sharp, not alarming, but age like paper sealed away from time. Rex lowered his head slightly, his nose moving closer to the opening. Not rushing, not forcing, just confirming. Ethan reached forward, his hand moving through the gap, his fingers brushing against something smooth, rectangular. He paused for a brief second, grounding himself in the moment, then carefully pulled it free. The object was wrapped in a thin layer of plastic, worn but intact, the edges firm. Unmistakable, a small storage device, the kind used to carry information, not valuables, something meant to be kept, not displayed. Ethan held it lightly in his hand, turning it slowly between his fingers, the significance settling in without noise, without shock, just clarity. Behind him, the world remained quiet. No returning footsteps, no interruption, only the distant sound of wind moving through the trees and the soft rustle of Rex shifting his weight. Ethan nodded faintly to himself. The pattern was complete now. Not every detail, but enough to understand the shape of the truth. Rex had never reacted without reason, never misread the moment. He had been pointing here, to this, to something that had been hidden not by accident, but by choice, something that explained everything that had come before. Ethan slipped the device carefully into his jacket pocket, his hand resting there for a moment, as if to confirm it was real. Rex stepped closer, his shoulder brushing against Ethan's leg. The contact brief, but intentional, a quiet acknowledgement. Ethan turned slightly toward him, a small, almost unnoticeable smile forming, not from relief, but from understanding. "You saw it before anyone else," he said softly. Rex's ears flicked once in response, the sound of the wind rising again around them. The sky beginning to clear as the last of the storm moved away. Ethan stepped back from the shed, the loosened panel now hanging slightly open, no longer hiding what it once concealed. The space between the houses felt different now, lighter, as if something that had been held down for too long had finally been released. And though Ethan could not see the change, he could feel it in the air, in the silence, in the steady presence of the dog beside him. Because sometimes the truth does not arrive with noise or force. Sometimes it waits quietly until the right hands are willing to uncover it, and the right heart is ready to believe it. The house felt different that evening, not because anything had changed on the surface, but because something unseen had finally settled into place. Ethan sat at the small wooden table, the device resting in front of him, its weight light, but its meaning undeniable. Rex lay nearby, not asleep, never fully asleep, his ears shifting occasionally toward distant sounds, but his body at ease in a way it had not been before, as if the quiet tension that had followed them since the first day had finally found its release. Ethan ran his fingers slowly along the edge of the device, not trying to open it yet, not rushing toward answers, because for the first time, he understood that the truth had already been revealed in the way it mattered most, not through screens or files, but through trust, through instinct, through a bond that had never once failed him. Outside, the air carried the soft warmth of late afternoon, the storm, long gone, leaving behind a sky that felt wide and open. The kind of sky Ethan could no longer see, but could still feel in the way the light touched his skin. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed, its sound brief and fading, and for once, Rex did not react. He remained still, calm, his breathing slow and steady. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair, a quiet understanding settling deep within him. The reports had been wrong, or perhaps incomplete. The story of what had happened before had been shaped by what people believed they saw, not by what had actually been there, not by what Rex had sensed, because Rex had never acted out of confusion, never without reason. He had seen something others had missed, something that had now led Ethan to the truth hidden just a few feet away from where they stood. Ethan reached forward and picked up the device, holding it gently in his hand, his thumb brushing over its surface. "You were trying to show them," he said quietly, his voice steady, not filled with anger, only clarity. Rex lifted his head slightly, his ears tilting toward Ethan's voice, the connection between them unspoken but complete. Ethan placed the device back down, not because he feared what it contained, but because he no longer needed it to understand the most important part of the story, the part that could not be recorded or stored, the part that had lived in Rex all along, the truth of who he was, the truth of what he had tried to do. Outside, the wind moved, gently through the trees, carrying a soft, steady rhythm that felt almost like a breath. And in that quiet moment, Ethan rested his hand on Rex's head, his fingers moving slowly through the thick fur, grounding himself in something real, something certain. "You were never dangerous," he said softly. "You were just the only one paying attention." Rex leaned into the touch, his eyes half closing, not from fatigue, but from a quiet sense of belonging. And as the light faded into evening, the world around them seemed to settle into a different kind of silence, one that no longer carried questions or doubt, but something else entirely, something calm, something whole, because sometimes the greatest truth is not what is uncovered at the end of a story, but what was quietly there from the very beginning, waiting for someone who could not see to finally understand it.